Thank you, Allie. It is now my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, Philip B. from Echo Park.
Party people!
There you go.
Yeah! Tag team music and full effect.
Because that's exactly what we listen to down there. There's that, yeah. Hi, my name is Philip, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm so moved by the chips and the cakes. Well, it's just what a great thing to be a part of. I'd like to thank Scott for asking me to come speak. I met him at the first meeting I came to here, and like the Hand of AA, he reached out to me, and you've gotten some really great speakers. You've been of great service to this meeting. And before I got up, he said, the bar has been raised. I'm like, oh, no, I'll bring it right back down again. I'd like to welcome the newcomers. You know, at the end of meetings all around the world, we pray. We have a moment of silence, and we pray for alcoholics who are still suffering. You may be here tonight because those prayers were answered. Someone's listening. You're here. And if you have a day sober today, you've got some leverage on this thing. I implore you, just get through the day. Just get through the rest of this day. That's all any of us have to do. You know, the crazy thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is that the second you walk through that door and mean business, you're of use. You're plugged in. We need you. We need every single person in here. You know, I mean, if I'm sitting between somebody with 40 days and someone with 40 years, and if I want to drink, I'm going to turn to the guy with 40 days and say, what are you doing today to not drink? Because it's still crispy with that person. You say, well, we went to 5 movies yesterday, and I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, and we had a spitting contest in the parking lot at Denny's. You want to come along? I'm like, great, you know. Because the guy with 40 years, you know, he's going to say, well, you know, I mean, if I drank, my ex-model wife and I were going to take out the Mercedes and drive up to Solvang for the cheese festival, and I'd have to say goodbye to all of that, you know, and can't have that, you know, and both of those are valid reasons to not drink today, right? But the thing is, and I got to say this, we don't usually get back. We don't usually get back. When I got sober, a hero of mine had 5 years. I thought he was just the greatest guy. I spent my first Christmas with him. Beautiful wife, a couple of kids who adored him. He was funny. He was great looking. And he relapsed. And it broke my heart to go to meetings and see him shucking and jiving and trying to and act like he was okay, and everyone knew he was using. And he died, you know. He died in a solo car crash out in the middle of the desert. He had emptied out their bank account and had written a letter to his kids. And the thing that struck me is that whatever that thing was that was killing him, that he thought was his disease, lied to him to tell him that thing was so important he couldn't make it back here. Where is it? Where is that today? It's a lie. That's what my disease tries to do to me. It tries to lie to me, that I need something outside of myself to make myself okay. And the lesson I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that I don't. Everything I need is provided to me in the steps, in this fellowship, and in my relationship with my higher power, who I call God. We talk about God a lot in here, and I will just ask you, I remember something my friend Charlie said. A lot of us were sitting around years ago, and we were talking about God, and a couple of people were having a problem with the concept. And he said, look, 2 months ago, you're sleeping on a couch in an alley behind a Pep Boys, wondering if you could maybe sell your body to somebody who'd get you a 40 of OE. And today, your delicate theological sensibilities are having a problem with the God concept in Alcoholics Anonymous. Relax. Just keep coming back. Work the steps. The thing is that I don't have to figure God out before I start to do this thing. Step 12 tells me that having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, right? Because God is as unmanageable to me as the rest of my life. I don't know what the hell it is. And I figured it out as I went along. I love this thing that this comedian says, which is, he heard this from the road manager for AC/DC, who said, God is the name of the blanket we put over the mystery to give it shape so that we can talk about it, right? And I think that's all we're talking about in here. Just something higher than myself, because I can't solve a problem at the level of a problem. I can't solve my alcoholism with my alcoholism. I just can't do it, you know? My start date's December 7th, 1992, so I have 2 months and 33 years today. And I've been sober half my life. And I will say I've had the exact amount of time sober as I had not sober, and I prefer it sober. So just if experience means anything to you. I firmly believe that my alcoholism predated my drinking. I think I had alcoholism before I started to drink. And I believe, anything I say is just my opinion based on my experience. I drank alcohol to treat my alcoholism. And it worked really well for a while. It was a great treatment for my alcoholism. If it hadn't worked so well, when it worked, I wouldn't have kept trying to make it work again. You know? So I'll just tell you some of my story. I don't like to spend a lot of time in my drinking story. First of all, it's just so long ago. Secondly, I have one of the least sexy drinking stories in Alcoholics Anonymous. I just do. I didn't get in trouble with the fuzz, you know. I never got like a DUI. I wasn't running from the man, you know. I did climb Mount Whitney by mistake. But that had more to do with drugs than alcohol, so that's a different program. I'll tell you that story at that meeting. But when I was 5 or 6 years old, I remember watching this cartoon on television, and there was this grasshopper, and he's playing his fiddle, and he's really charming, and he's got this scarf on, and he's wearing a hat at a very rakish angle. And he's playing his fiddle, and he's singing about how charming he is and how life owes him a living, and aren't I great? And at the dirt at his feet, there are these ants, and they're carrying like whole hams and watermelons and food, and they're going into this hole in the ground. And one of the ants looks up at him and says, "Hey, Mr. Grasshopper, winter's coming. It's going to get cold. You better start gathering some food." And the grasshopper's like, "Go to hell. I'm a grasshopper. I'm charming. I don't need to do that, you know, you ant." And so I love this grasshopper. I'm watching this. I'm like, yes, I love this guy. That's my guy. So cut to the ants are down in their hole having this party, and they're drinking and eating all the food, and it goes up, and it's a blizzard. And this poor grasshopper sitting there freezing to death, and he set his fiddle on fire so his little grasshopper arms won't snap off in the cold. And suddenly, with horror, I realized, oh no, I thought he was the hero of the story. He's the asshole. I'm not an ant, I'm a grasshopper. I don't know how to take care, I don't know how to gather food. I'm in trouble. I don't know how to do this at 5 years old. At 5 years old, I had that going on. So, if that's not incipient alcoholism in its early stages, it's close enough for jazz, right? I mean, that's been my mindset. One of the problems with this disease, one of the things that makes it so lethal, is it's a threefold illness. We have a physical allergy to alcohol. Our bodies metabolize alcohol differently than non-alcoholics. And the more confusing thing is that our bodies metabolize alcoholism different from each other, right? I mean, you've heard stories, I've heard them, you know, over the course of my sobriety. I've heard, you know, you're 9 years old, you just curiously open your parents' liquor cabinet, and, you know, you wake up 6 months later in Sinaloa, you got a full beard and a wife and 3 kids, and they're like, what the hell happened? You know, it's like that, you know. That wasn't my experience. My drinking was of a more gradual nature, and I crossed that invisible line from which I couldn't return. You know, it's the thing is they say that once you become a pickle, you can't become a cucumber again. So I was raised in a family of really decent, really wounded people. I was born in West Texas, the youngest of three. My mother and father were not alcoholics, I don't believe, but liquor was a very important part of their life. And I think they made whatever guarantees with each other they needed to make to where they could keep drinking and not have it be a problem. Because we were the kind of family who we did not let people see that we had a problem. We had to keep everything looking nice. You know, we were white middle-class Presbyterians, you know, out in West Texas, and we were church-going and voters and citizens and all that kind of stuff. And inside the house, it was like it was like an episode of The Brady Bunch, but it was written and directed by David Lynch, right? My mom was what used to be called moody. I suspect she probably had undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And she used to go off on these rages where just the house would blow up. She would say anything. She'd say the meanest, nastiest stuff she could think of to say to you. And then 30 minutes later, she'd be okay, and she'd expect everybody else to be okay as well. And my father would he was old school. This is my wife. I take care of her, and woe betide anybody bring it up again, right? So we just lived under that sort of tension. Didn't cause my alcoholism. Didn't do it any favors either. Just, I don't know what caused my alcoholism. All I know is I ended up with it. All I know is I started out with it. So we go along. We're doing okay as a family. But when I'm 12 years old, my father's away at school, at college, getting his graduate degree, and I start being abused by a couple of mentors, not in my family, but close family friends. And I came from a family where it was not, you don't talk about what's going on. And of course, like a lot of kids, I was told by my abusers, you can't tell anybody this. The world will fall apart if you do that. So I started learning really early to keep secrets. And I remember I was on the honor roll, and I was doing great, and my grades fell off, and I started cutting myself, and nobody in my family was really paying attention. And my father, bless his heart, one time he's driving me home from school, and he says, "Sonny, what's wrong with you? Your grades are bad, and you look weird. What's going on with you?" And I'm like, maybe I can tell him. So I start to warm up by saying, Dad, Mom's crazy, right? And I'm trying to get him to be an ally with me. I said, I can't talk about anything because she gets so angry. And I'm starting to talk about my mom. And as I'm talking, I don't notice it, but he's pulling the car over to the side of the road. And he gets to the side of the road, and he reaches across, and he opens my door, and he says, "Get out and walk. If you think I'm going to sit here and listen to you talk shit about your mom, you're crazy. She's killing herself for you kids, and you're a spoiled brat, and I'm not going to have it." He didn't do that on purpose. He didn't have any. Those were his skills. That's what he had. That's what he had. That's what he had to parent with, right? But I learned that I'm on my own. I can't ask for help from anybody. So I get to high school, and by the time I'm in high school, I'm in trouble. I don't realize the kind of trouble I'm in, but I've quit sports. I've quit. I get into theater because they had girls, and this man, a teacher there, God bless him, the unfortunately named Jack Hunsucker, took me under his wing. He saw something in me that he really liked, and he saw some promise in me, and he helped me. And I was so mean to him. By that point I was so guarded, and I was so defensive, and I said awful things to him. I kidded him about the way he looked, and he just laughed about it. It rolled off his shoulders. He got me out of high school. He talked to a couple of teachers who I was failing in their classes, and they passed me, and he saw to it I got a scholarship to college, you know. And I got to make amends to him for the way I treated him after I got sober, and that was very, very meaningful to me. Now, I wasn't drinking because I had to keep control. No one was going to listen to what I had to. I was just afraid if I get drunk, I might start talking, and someone might find out about me. And so my whole thing is I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm getting out of this town, I'm getting out in the world, and I'm going to make my mark, right? So, I mean, I had a half beer here and there at parties at high school, and I'd watch other kids drink, and I'd kind of pretend I was drunk so I could sort of fit in. But I was not drinking, you know? So I get to college, and it's horrible because, you know, my whole desire to get out of there, I thought that was all I needed was to leave. And I get to college, and I realize I'm totally unequipped for the world. I'm a grasshopper, and all these ants are going off to class, and they're, you know, making friends, and I'm getting more and more isolated, and I start having suicidal ideation. Well, one day, an upperclassman who was old enough to buy alcohol knocked on our door and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the liquor store. You guys want something for the weekend?" My roommate Ben says, "Yeah, I'd like a beer. Did you get me a beer?" And he goes, "Yeah, what do you want, Philip?" And I said, this came out of my mouth. I said, "I'll take a couple of bottles of Mad Dog 2020. I needed a drink." And I'm like, who? I'm a blues musician all of a sudden, you know? I'm this Presbyterian kid from West Texas. I'll have two bottles of Mad Dog 2020. I didn't even know what that was. And he says, "Are you sure?" I said, "That shit's mama's milk to me." So he comes back with a beer for Ben, 2 bottles of Mad Dog 2020 for me. By the end of the night, Ben had had his beer and a half of one of my bottles of Mad Dog 2020, and Ben had lost his mind. He had done that scary thing where he passed out, but his eyes are open, and he's like comatose, and he's like looking at people, and it was like, oh, Ben's freaking us out, man. Now, I drank the rest of that bottle, and then I finished the other one, and I was drunk. But I remember I didn't black out, I didn't get sick, and I just remember saying, I'm going to explore this. I've opened a door. I've given myself some breathing room here. There's something new I can explore here. And I just remember loving the look of impressiveness on that upperclassman's face when I told him to get me a couple of bottles of Mad Dog 2020. Now, I did realize I don't want to drink any more of this crap because this is horrible. That part of it was bad, but I'm going to start to experiment and figure out what's going on here. At a college mixer, I meet the girl I'm going to date for the rest of my college career, and we're dancing on the floor, and a song comes, like 3 Times the Lady comes on, right? Now, I loved that song when I was a kid. I thought that was just the most romantic song, and I'm out there, and I'm trying to have a moment with her, right? So it's like her second date, first date, and she starts making fun of the song. She's doing twirls and all this kind of stuff, and I just remember thinking, okay, I'm missing the point here. There's something going on here, and I don't understand how these people are behaving like this, but I don't want to feel this way anymore. And I swear to you, within 2 weeks, I learned how to drink. I was starting to drink beer regularly. My music taste changed. It was the 70s, so like Elvis Costello and The Clash and the Cars and Springsteen were happening. And I went from 3 Times a Lady to those guys, and literally like the span of 2 weeks. And I swear to you, I found my tribe. I found myself. Alcohol saved my life. It saved me. It gave me a way to be in this world that made sense to me. I'm like, oh, that's what's been missing. Okay, now I can get off to the races, right? And so what happened was that I was a very good drinker, and by good drinker I mean I could drink copious amounts of alcohol and not seem to have it affect me that much. I'd feel kind of drunk, but I wouldn't slur my words. I wouldn't, wouldn't get into car crashes, and I'd drink people under the table. I took that as evidence that I'm not a drunk. Because I thought, well, drunks, they have a couple drinks and go crazy, like Ben, right? My roommate, I can drink a bottle of whiskey. Yes, I'm rocking, that's great. I started compulsively lying to my girlfriend. Bless her heart, Carrie, man, she was, bless her heart. I made amends to her, and she accepted. But she didn't really want to have anything to do with me. And the saddest thing about that to me is I genuinely loved her. She was my first love. And the person she didn't want to talk to isn't me, right? It was that guy. But so here's what happened is, early on in our relationship, she comes by my room and there's a picture on the desk of me and this girl, a friend of mine from my hometown, who I took to a dance. And just as friends, and we'd had a picture taken, and she sent me this picture. And so Carrie says, oh, who's that? And I say, oh, that's Debbie. She was my girlfriend from high school. She died in a plane crash a year ago. And Carrie's like, oh, my God, that's horrible. That's awful. I'm like, yeah. Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you, that sort of thing. This sort of dramatic, romantic guy. And it wasn't until years later with step work, because all I said was like, yeah, I'm a liar and I feel horrible about it. But I didn't realize, now why would I tell that lie to Carrie? I had trauma in my life. I had actual trauma that had happened to me. I couldn't talk about that with her. I had no way to access that for myself, but I needed a buffer between me and being intimate with her. So whenever it would get scary for me, I'd go into my Debbie mode, my high school girlfriend who died in this plane crash. And of course, over the years that we dated, at some point I'm drunk and it comes, I say, oh, that's just, she didn't die. That didn't happen. And Carrie's like, what? What's wrong with you? Another lie I told is that my big brother was this heroic figure and that I'd been jumped by these 5 guys and my big brother waded into it and beat 3 of them up and scared the other 2 away. And my big brother, bless his heart, never lifted a finger to help me with anything, right? But again, I needed a hero. I needed someone to step in and take care of me, right? Now, I've become that guy for myself. And I've let people in these rooms be that person for me, but I needed that. So my lies weren't just about me being an awful person. It was my alcoholism trying to make some sort of sense of my world. So I go out into the world, drink, and what happens is I just start getting sadder and sadder and more alone. And I start drinking alone a lot at home. And so I'll just cut to what happened when I got sober was the last summer that I drank, I was on a job down in Argentina and in Buenos Aires. And I'm in my hotel room the night before. Now, I'm at a 5-star hotel in Buenos Aires being paid cash for this job. And I'm pissed off at God. And I'm like, I've had it with you, man. I've done my whole life trying to do your thing, and I'm miserable all the time. I can't get a girlfriend. I'm down here in Buenos Aires. I hate it here. And people that don't even believe in you, they're out playing tennis and going to parties and having a great time. You're off the show, man. I'm done with you. But I'm not going to go to the dark side, but I've had it with you. Enough's enough. So I go to the job the next day, and I'm sitting there, and I've got a little notebook that I write all my deep thoughts in. And this guy comes up to me, and he says, hey, man, is this seat taken? And he was kind of a big shot on this job, and he's a big guy, scary looking, had scars on his face. I said, no, sit down. He said, my name's Michael. And I said, hey, Mike. And he said, what's going on? I said, I'm having an argument with God. And he says, what about? And I said, well, since you asked. And I start running down my list of how, God screwed me over. And he says, wow, it sounds like you have a pretty conditional relationship with your Creator. And I'm like, what the? Who? Because I was hoping he'd say, wow, let's get the word out on this guy. He's deep. This is one heavy cat, right? Of course, he was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? Now, he doesn't lead with that. He doesn't pitch that to me. He doesn't try to convert me. He just, like, because I think I said, hey, let's go get some drinks after work. He says, I don't drink. You see these scars on my face? That was me going through a windshield in a drunk driving accident a few years ago. So I knocked that stuff off. But so I was down there for about 10 days, and every day at lunch, he would come sit with me and just talk with me. And the day I was leaving, I go up and I say goodbye to him. He says, give me that little notebook of yours. And he takes it and he writes his name and his phone number in it. He says, when you get back to LA, if you feel like just shooting the breeze, give me a call. And he hugs me. And when he pulls back, I saw that he had tears in his eyes. And I'm like, this poor bastard, man. He needs a friend. I'll throw him a bone. I'll give him a call. Sure, what the hell? You know? He was looking at a dying person, right? So I'm on my way back to home, and over the Andes, the plane I'm in loses 2 engines. One of them in a ball of flame. And we drop 5,000 feet, the masks come down, and I'm like, whoa, what was that? You know, wow. Could I get some more whiskey? And she comes over and says, the plane's crashing. The plane is crashing. And I'm like, yeah, more whiskey, please. That's why they make it, you know? And then they put down this screen and they show the movie that they don't show you on the ground. This is the movie that tells you how to place your head in the place where you could best kiss your ass when you're crashing. And I wasn't even conscious enough to be frightened. The biggest thing I was disappointed. I just thought, I haven't done a thing with my life. I'm so inauthentic. This guy, Michael, that I'd met, there was just something so pure about this guy. He owned himself so deeply that he was totally transparent. He had nothing to hide from anybody. He had this golden thread that went from his heart down to the center of the earth, and it was anchored there. And I'm trying to be Mr. Cool, and I'm like Ethel Merman on the Hindenburg, you know, inside. I'm like, ah, you know. And so, in total state of panic. So we make it back to LA because I'm here tonight. So, no, actually, I'm a ghost. So later that summer, I'm on another job. We're in Yuma, and whenever we would get through with the day, I would go to the room with the guys who had all the drugs and alcohol, and we'd party. I hate that word when it's used in that way, because doesn't party indicate a celebration of some kind? You know, I was not celebrating on those days. I was keeping my life afloat, I thought. And I was with these guys, and I was a little bit older, and I would talk about my deep shit, right? And they're like, God, Philip's so heavy, man. He's this heavy cat. And I was at a point where I was starting to talk about, I don't drink and take drugs that much. I'm a little bit above that with you guys. But what happened was I had a stash of pot and whiskey in my own room. So I say, I'll be right back. So I'd go to my room, you know. I had like a bong mustache for 5 years. I had just this red ring around my, and then I'd go back to the room. I was like, no, man, it's cool. God, man, yeah, he's everything. He's everywhere. So on my way to my room to have my little extracurricular thing, I see this one guy who's on the job, and so it's at the edge of the desert in Yuma, and there's this hotel, and it's at the end of a development, and there's the sidewalk that ends, and then it's just desert. So there's this cat, and he's come home, he's taking a shower, he's got a towel wrapped around him, and he's air drying out there, and he's playing a saxophone. And I walk over and I'm like, that is so cool, man. You like Charlie Parker? I like Charlie, you know, let's talk jazz. And he's like, in such a nice way, but he said, could you leave me alone? I'm just relaxing. I'd love to talk jazz with you, but right now I've got sort of more important things to do. But please, I'd love to talk with you later, but right now I'm just doing my thing. And again, he had this center to him. And I was a million miles away from that person. So what happened, I heard someone earlier talking about, being unhoused, and, I had worked my way into, because alcohol was so important to me. I had structured my life around, I'm not going to get in trouble with this. Because if I get a DUI, I've got a problem. If I have to go to jail, I've got a problem. I am not going to, this is too important to me to have a problem with. And I was holding on to that and not seeing what a problem I had with it. And I'm living in an apartment in Studio City, but it's like, inside I'm sleeping in my car. Right? And I remember waking up one night at 3 o'clock in the morning and looking at my mattress and saying, it's that thing. Too many memories wrapped up in that thing. So in underwear and one black sock, I dragged my mattress up to the street because that's the solution. I'll get rid of this mattress, and then everything. So I go up there, and my next door neighbor was a high school shop teacher, and he's just coming home from someplace, and he's got a fishnet T-shirt on and leather pants and a stormtrooper's hat, right? So I'm standing here in my underwear and sock, and he's dressed up like he's just coming back from a leather bar, and we're trying to pretend we don't sort of see what I'm like, hey, Linus, how you doing? Okay, good, feel good. So that's where my life is going. Didn't get a new mattress. I slept on a pallet across the room from this rectangle of dust where my mattress used to be with my bed. That was the way I was living when I got in here. And I started dating another woman, and I broke up with her, and I did that romantic thing, that dramatic alcoholic thing where I said, you deserve better than me. And she said, I deserve better from you. You're grown. You're a full-grown man, and you shouldn't be acting like this. And she wanted nothing to do with me. And for some reason when I got sober, one of the things that really frightened me, no one knew the trouble I was in. All my people I thought were my friends who were, I thought, close to me, they said, I had no idea you had a problem with this. I just was seeing less and less of you. There have been a couple of times in my life when I've been deeply suicidal. And when I talked to people after, they said, I had no idea the kind of trouble you were in. Alcoholics Anonymous finally taught me how to start asking for help. And I came in here and I asked for help. And I got it. The biggest lesson I've learned since getting sober is that my disease, it's not a matter of me going to treatment or not. I mean, that's great, but my disease doesn't start getting treated when I go to treatment. It's treating constantly. My disease gets treated one way or the other, and it's constantly needing treatment. And when alcohol stopped working as a treatment, I had to find another treatment for my alcoholism, because it doesn't go to this neutral spot if I leave it alone. I've got this threefold illness. I've got a physical allergy, I've got a mental obsession, and it's not that I obsess over drinking. I haven't had a drink in 33 years. But I will obsess over, I'll go through the Rolodex. It's like, oh yeah, I knocked over a bottle at a dinner party one time when I was 25. I'll get 3 hours out of that today, And whatever I can find that will make, center me on myself. And my spiritual malady is twofold. I become nihilistic. I'm like, I didn't ask to be born. Did you just flash at me? Okay. I didn't, my spiritual malady is, I didn't ask to be born. Why should I participate? So what, I can watch a sunset. Who cares? I didn't ask to be born. I can eat a peach, so, Totally ungrateful and entitled. And the world is set up to disappoint me when I'm in that place. And the other side of that is I want to feel better without having to think better or act better. And alcohol was, when it worked, the perfect solution with that. Oh, you want to feel better without having to think better or act better? Here, take a drink. Hey, that works. Wow, okay, yeah. And when it was working for me, the promises were kind of coming true. Monetary fear of financial insecurity, gone. You know? I instinctively knew how to do things that used to baffle me, like dance, you know? Like, you know. However far down I'd gone, I was sure it could benefit you if I could get you to stand still long enough for me to tell you about it, you know. And that stopped working completely, and it had to be substituted with a different treatment. And that's the treatment I've learned in here doing the steps. For a guy who doesn't like to talk much about his drinking career, I spent a good amount of time there. But the thing is, it's just I hope what you take away from this is to see that like this, there are so many different stories in here, but what I described to you is alcoholism. It was my alcoholism. I spent years out there thinking, I don't know what this is. I don't seem to have alcoholism because it didn't match up to what my definition of it was. But I'll tell you something, being in here and watching my thinking and behavior stone cold sober, I got alcoholism, you know. So I'll just say quickly, going through my life, I got married at 10 years sobriety, had a son. We had this little house in Echo Park, and I became so happy for the first time in my life. I couldn't stand it. I was so happy, and what I did was I wanted my life to stop. I wanted the world to stop. I finally got that balance going. Please, world, stop. And life doesn't work that way. And I started gaining weight and getting more and more isolated, and because my sponsor would say actions to take, and it's like, no, that's going to rock the boat. I don't want this happiness to end. And I didn't see the effect it was having on my marriage until my marriage ended. And I have a beautiful ex-wife. I'm a wonderful ex-husband. She's sober a long time, and we're wonderful friends today. And we've raised this beautiful son together. But so a couple of years after we split, she was dating a guy, and he was going to move in with them. Now, on paper, I was okay with that. He was a good dude. He was sober. I felt like they were safe with him. But inside, I'm going crazy, right? I get 2 moving violations that in a week. And so one night, I'm downtown, and I've worked myself into such a lather. I'll end with this. I call up my sponsor, and I read him this litany of just, I am such a sweet cat, man. And I have taken the fuzzy end of the lollipop my whole life, and I have had it. I am up to here with it. I'm such a good dude, and I suffer all the time. And he said, Philip, this is killing you. This is killing you. And when I say that, I think you hear me telling you you're wrong. And I'm not even telling you you're wrong. You may be absolutely right. So what? You're like a lawyer who's polishing up your closing arguments to a case that ended a decade ago. You're in an empty courthouse with your closing arguments. No one's there. And he goes, and I promise you, if you had a table of people who are on this list of people you're pissed off about, and he said, and you, remember in the 6th grade when you did that thing to me? And then you, when I was in college that time, and you really screwed me over. He said, if you read this to them, and they all started sobbing and saying, Philip, oh my God, we've wronged you so deeply. How can we make this right? Can we throw you a parade? Would that work? He said, I promise you, a week later, you'd be driving around and the thought would cross your mind, you know, as far as parades go, that was about 2 floats and a marching band shy of a really good parade. And when he told me that, I realized that good news and bad news, the phenomenon of craving does leave. Resentment does not stop being the number 1 offender. It is still, at 33 years, the number 1 offender. And I realized in that moment that no human lips can kiss my ass at the depth at which I think it needs kissing to feel vindicated when I'm in my disease, when I'm in that place, when I'm in that untreated alcoholism, right? That's where I go to. So I said to him, I said to my sponsor, I said, then you tell me, what is the expiration date for me to stop grieving the death of my marriage, and I'll stick to it. Because I've been through the 12 and 12. I've read the big book cover to cover countless times. I didn't see that page where it says, here's the appropriate amount of time for a drunk to get over the death of his marriage. Tell me when that is, because I didn't get that memo. When's the appropriate amount of grieving for that? And he says, I'm not going to tell you that because you're not going to ever stop grieving this on some level, but I will tell you that what you're doing isn't grief. It's grievance. Because when you start to feel actual grief bubble up for you, it scares you. You think it's going to overwhelm you, and you take it into grievance and resentment because that gives you some feeling of power, and all that does is dig this hole. And you just go deeper and deeper, and every time you call me, your argument sounds better. I'm starting to believe this shit, you know? And that changed my sobriety. That was 15 years ago, and it transformed my sobriety because it made me finally understand that resentment itself becomes an addiction of mine that I use to take the place of me just being present with you. You know, I used to say, you know, you're blocking my view of God. Could you get out of, I'm trying to look at God here. And I realized, no, dummy. You're the window through which I see God. I see it through you. I see it through other members of this glorious society that we belong to. I hope I've said something that can help somebody. I know I've been a little all over the place, but I love you all so much. I can't tell you. You saved my life. Here we are on Saturday night where I'd say most of us sober. It's 8 o'clock. What are the odds, you know? So let's just, again, if you're new, let's stay that way. Go to bed tonight. We'll wake up tomorrow. We'll all try this thing again. And none of us have to do this alone. Thank you for my life.